should be yourself, King. Should be yourself. And really the greatest thing that you could be is to be yourself.
God created you on purpose for a purpose, and this is the space where we help you become the man you are made to be. Today I have a great guest named Paul, and Paul is a comedian and a podcaster in Atlanta, and I'm super excited to have him on, and I believe that the work he does is great and it's interesting. So Paul, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I would like to start this conversation with interest. One of my favorite questions I enjoy asking guests is, if your life was a movie, what would be the key scenes?
Oh, wow. I think first of all, thanks for having me on, Ike. I appreciate your interest and it's good to meet you. I think one of the first key scenes would be a scene from my family dinner table in 1979 or so, when I was 10 years old. I'm one of 6 kids. I grew up in a loud, fun, crazy household in suburban Atlanta. And my parents were very involved, great parents. But our dinner table was this scene that when one of my siblings would have a friend over for dinner, they would always remark afterwards, if they weren't from a big family, they would always say, my goodness, what was that all about? That was insane. And it was all of us shouting over each other, trying to get the last word in, trying to make a joke, trying to get our parents' attention. My dad would go around the table and ask the guest one question, or ask everybody to ask the guest one question. And then the guest had to go back around and ask each of the siblings one question. So it was sort of a fun, orchestrated thing. And I think that was a big part of creating who I became.
So it sounds like being a part of that family dynamic has allowed you to embrace chaos.
Or run away from it, one of the two.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
No, it's the chaos in our household was good chaos. My parents were very positive people. My siblings are all still alive and healthy, and everybody's doing well. It was a very positive environment, but it was noisy, and there was competition for space and resources and the last piece of cake, but it was a loving home.
Awesome. So how did you transition into becoming a comedian? Because I'm always curious about people's artistic careers and their creative endeavors, and I always felt like being a comedian is like I don't know, it feels like a thankless or like a really hard job. Like, I don't know, I feel like it requires a lot of courage, and because you can bomb, and like, I don't know, sometimes I feel like they may not got the lack of respect unless you're really established. Like, what inspired you to become a comedian and pursue that path,
Well, I went to business school. After college, I went to graduate school because I wanted to make more money.
Okay.
And I was, I had done plays, and I'd acted in plays on stage in high school. And I'd always thought, wow, this is a really fun thing to do, but it's not like a real job. It's not. Yeah. And, I come from a generation that was older, that's older than yours. We were much more practical back then. My dad was raised during the Depression, and basically what he taught us was, you're going to go to school, you're going to get a good job, and you're going to work hard and save your money. That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And having a job like in the creative space and the arts wasn't really something that was considered to be a real job. I don't remember my parents ever, making fun of it, but economic security was the goal. And I always was very ambitious in terms of wanting to make money. So I went to business school. I went to business school at Dartmouth College, which is a very good school. It's called Tuck School of Business. And I always wanted to make a lot of money. So I thought, well, I'm going to go there. I'll figure out, I'll go into investment banking or consulting or something like that. And one night at a talent show where they had asked me to host a talent show, I guess because they thought I was kind of funny, but I'd never done stand-up comedy before. And I'd always loved stand-up comedy. I loved watching it. George Carlin, Steve Martin, Bill Cosby. Yes, before we found out everything we know about Bill now. Dennis Miller, all these great comics that I really, really loved, and they moved me on an organic level or on an emotional level. I really reacted to comedy emotionally. So I never really thought about doing it because it didn't seem real. But this one night, I just made fun of my friends in a very friendly environment in front of 250 other students. And it got this explosion of laughter over and over and over again. And I just thought, oh my gosh, what is this? What is this thing? And that was the night I got bit by the comedy bug. And, all of a sudden you start to see things differently. You go, oh, among this smart group of people, and it was a very smart group of people. In fact, I was not one of the smarter people in this class, but I was smart enough to get in. But that's the thing that made me different, was that I had this sense of humor, and a pretty refined sense of humor, and a biting one that probably was honed at that dinner table I was talking about earlier. That being funny is what makes me different. And being able, and not funny just making fun of people, but like making fun of the anxieties we all have. And it's easy to do that when you're in the same place, when you're all taking the same classes, when you're all living in a very small environment, when you all have the same concerns about getting a job after graduation or paying off your loans, whatever. It's very easy to do that. But that's where the dream was born, was in business school, ironically enough.
Yeah, that's so funny. Like, you ended up majoring in business to make money, then you became a comedian. I don't know if that's I don't know if that's how people usually think, but that's interesting. And as a comedian, as one of the things that I appreciate about comedy is the ability to make people laugh, and also the space created to speak your truth. And I think something about comedy that's really interesting is I feel like as long as you're funny, you can nearly say anything. And for me, personally, my favorite comedian is Dave Chappelle.
Yeah.
And I love that guy. I think he's super interesting and super comedic. And sometimes I just hear him talk, and I feel like he can literally say anything. Because
Dave's more than a comedian. He's a philosopher. I mean, and I believe that. I think that he is one of the wisest people that our generation, or that this period in time. That doesn't mean I agree with everything he says, but like he has the ability. He's so good that he can say whatever he wants to say, and people won't challenge him. And he's so smart and so courageous that he is transcended, to me, comedian, and gone into a different place.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. When I listen to Dave comedian, I'm always expecting to have something to reflect on and introspect about, which is what I love about him. And when I listen to comedians, I feel like something about comedians that y'all do a great job doing is just reminding us the importance of laughter and play and playful, and just being playful. I feel like, I don't know, maybe as me particularly, I feel like being playful is such an important aspect of life. And sometimes as a man, I feel like we can lose touch of that. At least for me, sometimes I feel like I could be so serious, like, and whatnot, and be like, I'm more of a type A person, and like, I gotta get this done and that and done. But as I'm getting older, I'm being more conscious of being more playful, and I think comedians do an incredible job of doing that.
Well, some are more playful, and some are more introspective or thought provoking. And I think that Chappelle is definitely in the thought provoking bucket. There's a guy from Atlanta who's very playful. His name is Mandel, and he was on the Tonight Show a month or so ago. And if you watch his set, which was brilliant, by the way, I mean, and I've known Mandel for almost 10 years, I think, from doing comedy in Atlanta. And, I've watched him develop, and he's really, I've seen him do this act for a long, long time. But what he did on the Tonight Show was masterful and so different from what so many other comics do. He was 100% himself in that moment. He comes out in a brown tuxedo, and he's just having a good time from the minute he walks out. And the audience loved him. He was great. So there's, but it's very different than what a lot of other people. It's very different than what Bill Burr does. It's very different than what Shane Gillis does. It's very different than what Ricky Smiley does. Everybody's different.
Yeah,
and some are more playful, and some are more sort of serious and thought provoking.
Yeah, and in doing that, I've noticed though, like regardless of how different everyone seems, it feels like the best comedians are the ones who are the best at just being themselves. And another person that I really like is Joey Diaz. I think he's hilarious, and I think he does a great job of just literally just being himself. And so you're now that you're in Atlanta, have you done comedy in Atlanta? And if so, I'm just curious, what is that like in comparison to other cities? You know, because I'm just curious because I'm from Atlanta and we're both from Atlanta.
Yeah, no, I did comedy in Atlanta for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I live in New York City now as of last summer of 2024. And I did comedy at the Laughing Skull and the Punchline sometimes. Probably 80% of the shows I did were at the Laughing Skull, and then bars around town and all over the metro area. So yeah, it's a great city for comedy. And one of the things that's positive about doing comedy in Atlanta is that, you know, there's a lot of spaces for developing comedians. There's a lot of spots for comics to get up before they're ready for the big time. And so there's a great way to develop in the scene without risking being, you know, seen by industry, meaning, you know, talent management or bookers for Netflix or something like that, until you're ready to be seen by industry. Like if you start in LA or New York, there's a lot less opportunity to develop than there is in smaller markets like Atlanta.
Yeah. And so relative to like cities like New York, I don't know. Would you say it's easier or harder? Because I would imagine, you know, I haven't been to a comedy spot in New York, but just knowing like the atmosphere, like I feel like people are a lot more grittier, like and like a lot harder to please. Like, would you say it's harder, or is it like easier, or is there?
It depends on the crowd. I mean, you know, it really, you know, a lot of crowds in some of the places in New York are not from North America. So there'll be a lot of people who speak English as a second language in the crowd. That's a whole thing that, you know, is that you got to learn how to deal with. Some neighborhoods you'll be in Brooklyn and it's all, you know, younger, sort of hipster left-leaning people, which would be very different than a crowd on the Upper East Side, for example. So I think what's harder about New York is there's just more people here. Yeah, there's 10 times the number of clubs, but there's 20 times the number of comedians.
Yeah.
And there's a whole industry that dominates the developmental spots that in Atlanta, you know, would go to comedians that are not known or very much lesser known comedians, whereas those are going through this corporate intermediary here that requires you to bring 3 people to every show or 5 people to every show, and it's just sort of this whole thing that gums up the system and makes it a lot harder to get spots, even if you're a pretty experienced comic.
Yeah, and so being in Atlanta, it seems like you have more opportunities to fail and without really getting without too much repercussion. It sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, failing is part of it. I mean, the only failing in comedy is not trying. And you talk about bombing before. I mean, people should bomb more than they do. Some people, actually, that's not true. Some people should. If you're bombing all the time, you're probably not that good. But if you're only doing the material that you know that works, then you're not trying. Then you're not taking enough risks.
Yeah.
So you should bomb some. You should be out there trying new material. And you don't have to do all new material, but you should try some jokes that work, then try some new material, see if there's something there, and then close with good material. That's generally, you know, like the sandwich or the donut that they say that's how you should try new materials in the middle of your act, so that you earn the crowd's confidence up front. You try some new material, and then you close with what, you know, works, so that their last impression of you is that guy was funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, Atlanta's a very good place to develop. Denver's a good place to develop. Chicago's a little bigger, but also a good place to develop. There are scenes where, you know, mostly the people that are judging you are other comics, you know, because a lot of independent shows are booked in those places. And, you know, yeah, you do need to get past in Atlanta. You do need to be working the Laughing Skull, or it's going to be kind of hard, because that's where the most developmental spots are.
Yeah, I was in my apartment complex. There's like a small little park, and sometimes like new comedians would come to do their acts and share their jokes. And there was one time I went with my ex, and we were watching this comedian, and he was bombing so hard. It was kind of awkward and funny. I don't know, and I don't know, in a weird way. Like even though he wasn't doing good, I thought the bombing was, I don't know. It's just interesting, and to see people go through that pressure of, even though you're not pleasing the crowd, like you still have to keep going. Makes me kind of curious to learn about, like, when was the last time you bombed, and how did you get through that?
Well, your reaction there is, I think what's positive about you, say, it sounds to me like the guy, his act wasn't working, but he didn't lose his composure.
Yeah, he kept.
And so, if you can maintain your sense of self and your confidence. I mean, I've been on stage plenty of times where you're like, oh, this isn't working very well. And you sometimes you say it out loud, and the crowd laughs, because it's a very real thing to say in the moment, because you're acknowledging what's happening in the room. And where people don't do well is where they're bombing and they don't acknowledge it, and they just keep trying to push forward and say, like, I'm going to keep doing this. Without acknowledging what's happening. Now, a comic might say, I know I'm bombing right now, but I'm going to keep going. And sometimes the crowd will clap just to be like, all right, let's see what you got, man. What's frustrating about a bomb isn't necessarily that your jokes aren't funny. Sometimes, there's just a large table of 8 people who are sharing food and eating and talking about it in the middle of your act. And learning how to deal with that kind of situation is something that is a skill born of repetition. And so you just have to figure out how to get out of that thing, because some people are just rude and clueless in the room, and until you learn how to navigate around them, you're not going to do well, because nobody can hear your jokes. And I think that's one of the things that, really is the distinction between good and great comics, is that they're going to be able to, they've seen so many different things, because every time you go on stage, it's a new combination of people and of the temperature in the room, and there's a buzz on the mic, or the mic keeps cutting out, or there's ambulances that go by in the street and you can hear the sirens. And every comedy show is a unique living being that will never be replicated. And if you've done it dozens of times, you might have decent jokes, but you don't have the experience of having every different thing thrown at you. I had one time 20 years ago where a guy was having a heart attack. I was hosting the show, and a guy was having a heart attack, and paramedics were right there in the room in the front row. And the manager looked at me and said, go on. I was like, what are you talking about? There's paramedics. He goes, we got 2 more shows tonight. You go start the show. And I was like, oh my God.
Sheesh.
So if you do it long enough, you see a lot of different things. You get better at dealing with the stuff the predictable unpredictability of the show.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm far from an entertainer. I don't really have too much entertaining experience, but I do DJ. And my last DJ gig was a wedding. I actually got the honor of being able to DJ for my friend, and I'm so happy for him. But even that was like a creative experience, and it was so much pressure because I was dealing with the bride, the groom, and everyone wanted certain songs. And they're like, yo, you gotta play this, you gotta play that. And I felt so much pressure, like, and I'm like, bro, this is crazy, like, and I would imagine, like, and there was only like 40 or 50 people, I don't know. Sometimes I would guess, for me, maybe this is why I'm not a comedian, I would feel like the pressure to succeed is just unbearable. And then sometimes I would be I'll probably be in my head like, am I working, am I not, or like, I just hats off to y'all, because I feel like
don't you think DJs have the same thing? I mean, you're not just the entertainer, you're the engineer, you're the coordinator. You gotta conduct the flow of energy in the room, up and down, and get people on the dance floor and get people off the dance floor. I mean, like, that's a big job.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, but I feel like, I guess for me, I love music so much. I don't look at it like that. But I feel like with DJing, everyone's like, oh, like, I don't know. I've never seen anyone really get mad at a DJ, or like when you go to a party, like people don't really pay too much attention to the well, I mean, obviously they enjoy the music, but I don't feel like, unless it's a wedding, that's different. But with comedy, I don't know. It's like everyone is looking at you, like, and I don't know. It's like, and everyone came for you, but for DJ, like, people don't really come for, like, I mean, it's like, it's all right. They came for the wedding, like, or something. You know what I'm saying? You're kind of just like the side product. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I'm trying to say.
Sure. Yeah. It's a different. There's different skills to different art forms, and different pros and cons. I mean, if you're a musician, yeah, you have a guitar to hide behind potentially, but you better know how to use that thing, or otherwise, people aren't going to stick around. So, look, if I could, I think most comedians, if they could play guitar, that's what they'd be doing. But we all do the best with what we got. That's the drill.
Yeah. So I'm super curious about the creative process of being a comedian, and what that preparation process looks like for you behind the scenes. Do you go about, like, everything you prepare for, like, do you just go on script, or are there any times where you just kind of use your intuition and just kind of start playing around?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely jokes that I've written over a decade or more that I use, and I know I'm going to use. But the best way to create one of the most productive ways to create is to have the ideas in your head that you've maybe written out on paper, or like, I've got a Substack. I've written, I don't know, 60 different Substack posts of 800 words or something like that sometimes are the form that they're sort of ideas that I want to flesh out, and I write them out as an essay, and then I'll try to integrate them as jokes into my act somewhere, in the middle of the act, like I was saying before, where it's like, or you'll add it as a tag in an old bit, and then you'll just sort of riff on that for a little while. But the key is just getting up on stage as many times as you possibly can, and so that you have the opportunity to work your material out.
Yeah, I hear you, Paul. And I'm curious, for you personally, do you have like like your best joke, or like what was like your most popular joke that, like, every time you do it, like, it's gonna kill?
Well, I'm not going to do my act for you right now, but you can put links to my Instagram bits on the show notes. But I have stuff about kids, about marriage, about about working at Facebook and data privacy and things like that I generally know are going to work. They're pretty reliable bits. If the crowd's a little younger or a little older, maybe you tweak it one way or the other so that you're emphasizing things that are really relevant to them, because single people don't want to necessarily hear a bunch of jokes about teenage kids, and older people don't want to hear a bunch of jokes about dating. I don't have any dating jokes anymore, but if you're talking to a bunch of people who are 65, 70, and I do all the time, then you have to understand what they care about, what's relevant to them, and you don't try to force I would never book like some comedian who only tells jokes about Tinder. I would never book them for an act in front of a 65-year-old crowd. It's just not going to be relevant to them.
Yeah, and as a comedian and just as a human being, Paul, I would imagine you've had a lot of great ideas. I love what you're doing with the podcast, and I know the question I'm about to ask is abstract, and I'm not sure if there's a direct answer to. But whenever you come up with a really good joke, or like a really good podcast idea, or just some really good creation, do you ever wonder, like, how did that idea just come out of me, or where did this idea come from, like, or like what was the original source of that?
Yeah, I think that the creative process, and the more I read about different artists' process, the more I think most artists see themselves as a vessel.
Yeah,
as that that they sit down and work, and when they're at their best, they lose themselves in flow. That it's a semi-unconscious effort that they're creating, and that they become one with the work. And I've experienced that, and I feel like my best My best work just comes to me, but it doesn't come to you. I mean, like you got to be doing the work, and you have to be open to it when it arrives, and you have to have done enough work by that point to recognize, oh, this is this is a special idea, and I know how to crystallize it very quickly. My best bits aren't things that I go, oh, what's funny about the subway? Although that's how Jerry Seinfeld works. And Jerry Seinfeld's been doing it for 50 years, and he's far more prolific than I am, obviously. And he sits down and he maps it out, and he makes a list of, two things that are different: the subway and McDonald's. What do they have in? Write a bunch of stuff down about these two things. What do they have in common? What makes them different? And that's obviously something I just pulled out of thin air, right? But I mean, I think the thing is that the more you do it, the more you write, the more inspiration happens. Like you can't. There's all these quotes. You can't wait for inspiration. You have to hunt it down with a hammer or something like that.
Yeah,
you really do have to work hard to get it. And for me, that's why I do. That's why like writing on Substack is my regular exercise to try to get ideas out of my head. And the more you try to do that, the more other ideas come to you. The more flexible and the stronger your brain the more flexible it comes to being open to ideas, the stronger it gets to fleshing them out.
I love what you said about most artists view themselves as a vessel. That's actually really interesting that you said that, because before every podcast, I actually pray to God to be used as a vessel. And so to hear you say that is interesting. And then my favorite rapper, Kendrick Lamar, literally says the same thing. Not necessarily that he prays to be a vessel, but he says that he views himself as a vessel for every song he creates. And that's so interesting that you bring that up to me. And you believe that essentially part of the creative process and that the source of those ideas come from a result of building up your craft consistently to the point where you can essentially recognize what's good and what's not without necessarily having like concrete proof, but just inner knowing.
Yeah, I mean, you develop your instincts. The more you do something, the more your instincts develop. Kendrick wasn't as good a writer or lyricist 20 years ago as he is today.
For sure.
And he couldn't have conceived of, the records he was going to make, 2 years ago when he was, 28 years old. And I think Kendrick is a profound artist.
Same.
And I mean, he's like Chappelle in the sense that he's a social commentarist, but he also, he puts it into and I'm not a musician, and I'm not a particularly well-studied hip hop historian or anything, but the guy puts it. He lays it out in music that is just wildly compelling and has a message at the same time. In the same way Chappelle takes social messages and turns them into laughter. Yeah. And so, I don't think, neither necessarily knows where they want to end up when they start, but they've done it long enough to say, I'll know when this is good. I'll know when a song, Kendrick will know when a song is complete. Yeah. Chappelle will know when a joke is fully written.
Yeah, I find that creative process interesting, knowing when to stop and when is good enough. And I obviously that intuition and that answers definitely come with more experience, but I just I always find it fascinating because I feel like with creativity, there's just unlimited options and you can literally go anywhere you want. But to know when to stop and when not to is very interesting. And so with the whole Kendrick thing, with the Dave Chappelle and all these great comedians, Paul, do you have a favorite comedian of yourself and why? I'm just curious. With all
Chappelle's certainly up there. Chris Rock is up there. Bill Burr, Gary Goldman. I like smart comedy. I like comedy that pushes the limits a little bit, that pushes the bounds of acceptability, and questions why we are the way we are.
Same. Same, yeah. So you're like me. You seem to like introspective like comedy, and that's kind of where I am, and I like introspective music. There's with one thing that I'm curious to hear about is with artists that inspire you to create. What would you say keeps you pushing forward in regards to your creative process? Like, what keeps you moving forward? Because I feel like there's just so many opportunities to want to quit, and I don't know, maybe it's
There
just me.
are. I worry. I think about quitting every day.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
mean, it's what pushes me is that there's nothing I want to do more than to improve as a writer and as a comedian. And that drive to be better. Look, I don't know that I'll ever be as good as Dave Chappelle or Chris Rock or Bill Burr. They have, each of those guys has a 25 year head start on me. So I'm going to have to live a long time and stay healthy if I ever want to even catch up with them chronologically. But, I have the opportunity to be the best version of me in the creative space. And that's the only thing I'm trying to compete against. There's, and when I see other people improving, it motivates me to want to get better as well.
yeah. I mean, the reason why I asked that, there's a book by Stephen Pressfield about overcoming resistance, and one thing that
I think I have it on my shelf. In fact, are you talking about The War of Art?
Yes, The War of Art. Yes,
The War of Art is one of the most important books. Anybody who's listening to this that's at all interested in creativity should read Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art. It is unbelievably good and unbelievably true. And what I was talking about before about overcoming, well, I guess we weren't talking about overcoming resistance, but what I was talking about, a meaningful amount of what I was talking about before about being a vessel for creativity is, Pressfield talks a lot about that in the book. He also talks about saying a prayer to the muse before he starts writing, just like you said, you say a prayer at the beginning. And what he's saying is he's trying to open himself up to ideas and to open his brain to whatever might happen, and whatever the source of that might be. Whatever you believe in is the source. And I don't think you even have to believe in anything. You just have to you have to believe in being open to ideas. And I think that's what Pressfield is talking about.
Yeah.
And overcoming resistance, Pressfield basically says the only way to overcome resistance is to sit your butt in a chair and write. And you can't wait for things for inspiration to arrive before you start to write. It's like, this is a job, sit down and write.
Yeah. For me, the topic of overcoming resistance is relatable because I have been doing this podcast and I'm 85 episodes in. And just like you talk about, there's days I think of quitting. It's the same thing with me. And I love my podcast and I don't plan on quitting. I would like to do this for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. But there's this resistance like to doing this. Even before this podcast, it's like, I don't really have to do this. It's like, what's the point? Nope. I'm barely making any money from this. But
you're making any money? You're making any money at all?
No,
you said you're barely making any.
I'm not. I
this should be costing you $10,000 a year.
I'm losing money. I have made some money, but barely anything to live off of.
I've lost massive amounts of money making my podcast. However, what it led to was people hiring me to come speak at their corporate events, and sometimes they pay me $10,000 or $20,000 a day to do that. And then you go, oh, wait a minute. This creative thing that I did because I was interested in it led to this commercial opportunity that I never anticipated. And I just did it because I was curious and I loved it. I found something worth doing. I did it for the right reasons and I kept doing it. And when you do those things, you sometimes run into opportunities and other people that will help you succeed in ways that you never anticipated.
Amen. And hearing you talk about that, the first thing I think about actually is I've made a lot of friends who personally have brought me closer to God. And I don't know what your relationship with God is, or if you have one, but that was actually one of the unexpected benefits of me creating this podcast. Another unexpected benefit was I actually ended up having a mentor for my real estate business who's been helping me. And it's interesting. I did not go into this podcast with the intentions of, hey, I'm gonna get a real estate mentor, or hey, I'm gonna get closer to God by having introspective conversations. It just happened. And so I guess for me, sometimes it's like that type A. It's like, yo, what am I gonna get out of this from showing up? Is kind of stops me from wanting to go because it doesn't seem as practical.
Well, I think one of the things, another unanticipated thing I got out of the podcast was I've met people that I would never have met before.
Same.
I've talked to LL Cool J and Judd Apatow and some really dozens and dozens of famous academics and authors that I never would have had the gall to write an email to and say, hey, why don't you and I talk? But if you have a podcast, crazy enough as it is, if you write a good enough email and you say to him and you have a demonstrated record of success, I've talked to these people about this topic. This is what's meaningful to me. This is what I care about. And I think that intersects with what you care about in these 3 ways, that kind of thing. And all of a sudden you're talking to famous authors.
Yeah.
And you go, wow, this is pretty cool. But it's also introduced me to new friends. It's also kept me closer to people I went to high school with, I went to college with, who I might not, if Facebook didn't exist or social media didn't exist, it would be more difficult. But this is the way that, technology has helped bring us closer. Technology has divided us in a lot of ways, but in this way, it's actually brought me closer to a lot of people that I have a relationship with today that I wouldn't have a relationship with. And by the way, whether you believe in God or don't, and I tend to not believe in God, or I'm an agnostic. What I do believe in is that using the gifts that you've been given as a human being is a divine pursuit.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And that there's a and I'll butcher the interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
There's a religious scholar named Thomas Merton who wrote something about being imperfect and not knowing exactly how to live, but the desire to live perfectly, the desire to know God, the desire to use your gifts that you've been given and recognize that the life you have is important and sacred, that does please God, that is something worth doing. And so your attempt to live morally, your attempt to live purposefully, your attempt to do something with your time instead of eating Cheetos on the couch all day, that is holy work. Yes. Regardless of what God or no God you believe in, I think that's holy work.
And that's why I feel so compelled to keep doing this podcast, because I know God gave me the ability to interview and ask questions. And so I'm continuously doing that and feeling like I'm being in obedience, in accordance with Him, trusting that things will come out for the better. And it already has. And I love to hear about all the unanticipated benefits that you have gotten out of it, because for me, it's very relatable. I have spoken to some of my favorite content creators, and some of my favorite artists as a result of doing this podcast, like artists, because I love hip hop. I've spoken to like some of these people are named YG Tut, Corey Jones, just creators that have influenced me greatly. And then I was like, wow, man, I really got the opportunity to speak with them. And then That's really wonderful. One of the things I saw that you did that really drew me attracted to you was like, man, like you're podcasting with all types of interesting people, from people like LL Cool J to the founder of Craigslist. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. And so I'm curious, how did you even find yourself? Because I know you got Ricky Smiley on too, which I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like I would love to have them on my podcast, man, just to get their perspective on rap and their impact on hip hop. How did you get them on? Like, that's so cool.
Well, I've probably about 80% of the guests that I've booked directly myself. Sometimes I'll have people reach out to me. It's incredible when you open up, you keep doing it. And then, at some point you open your email and some publicist has sent you an email saying, hey, would you want to have this Moby, the EDM, the DJ producer from 1990, who had the number one album of 1999. And when I tell you, Ike, that this was a big record, I cannot exaggerate that enough. Every single time you turned on the TV in 1999, 2000, Moby's music was there. It was on movies, it was on TV. Every single song on his album, I believe it was Go. Was it Go or Up? I don't know. I should know that. Was licensed for a commercial. It was huge. So anyway, I mean, this guy's an icon of a certain era. And, his publicist reached out and said, "Do you want to talk to him about his memoir?" And I'm like, absolutely, I want to talk about his memoir. So sometimes there's incoming stuff. A lot of the stuff I get incoming isn't a fit for what I do. And because a lot of people, I started my podcast with the name Crazy Money, and it made people think that this was all about making money, like through, we've got a foolproof way to make money in real estate while you sleep. It's like, that's not what it's about. It's about understanding the connection between money and happiness. Anyway, I changed it to reasonably happy so that it would be more of an overt discussion about happiness. Anyway,
awesome.
I also had a booker working for me for a while who was wonderful and got some great guests. But at a certain point, I got to focus on, spending the money I'm going to invest in this on like my social media management instead of about the booking. And I can get a lot of great, I've demonstrated for 5 years my ability to book people on my own. So that's kind of where I am right now. Because, if you want to grow, and this is the thing about podcasting and about anything in social media today, it's not going to happen by accident.
Yeah.
There's a very specific formula about how you market yourself online and how you build a following. And sure, 1 in a million podcasters can accidentally fall into, tickle the algorithm in exactly the right way that they become hugely popular in a short period of time. That is the exception that proves the rule. And so I'm focusing my investment on improving my social game starting October 1.
I definitely need to be on that too, man, and be more conscious of it. Because I sometimes as a podcast, I feel like I'm just coasting and I'm enjoying the conversations. But one day, I definitely want to take it to the next level and do it in person. Because I feel like there's only so much connections you can get from the physical part. I mean, remote, but it's accessible and it has its benefits. But one day I would like to increase my production quality of the podcast, And so when you were mentioning, Paul, that you got all these incredible guests, it's like, is this interesting? It was as simple as just sending them like a personalized email, essentially, right?
Well, I don't want to undersell it. I mean, there's a lot of people that said no. There's a lot of people who didn't reply. I mean, and the more famous they are and the bigger they are, the more likely they are to say no. But you never know. I mean, like, it's 100% of shots you don't take, don't go in, whatever. So I would advise, I think what I've done right is I'll identify people that I really want to talk to.
Yeah.
And I'll take the time to write them a thoughtful note. And so I would advise quality over quantity when it comes to trying to get people on your podcast, and to say, "Hey, person, this is what I care about. And this is where," and at the risk of repeating what I said earlier, these are the things that I'm trying to explore in my podcast. And I've noticed in your work, I've read your books, or I've watched your show, I've listened to your podcast, and here's the 3 things that keep coming up for you. 1, 2, 3. And this is why they're important to me. And I'd like to share your message with my audience, small but loyal, curious and engaged. And oh, by the way, here's the other people that I've had on that demonstrate, so as you can see, I care about what I'm doing. Even though I'm not huge, I care about what I'm doing. And especially if they're an author, I always tell them, I will read your book beforehand and I will come prepared to let them know that most importantly, I value their time. And number 2, I'm not just doing it to try to get a name. I'm doing it because I care about the way you think.
Yes. Yeah. So with my podcast, I can incredibly relate because my messaging scheme is somewhat similar to yours in the way you explained it, and I always like to share a podcast that I did that I feel like is similar to the work they've done, like with a podcaster. So if I'm trying to get a rapper on the podcast, like I would share like a similar podcast, like a similar rapper or something, or same thing with a YouTuber. And it's to me, is to this day I'm still shocked by the type of people who say yes. Like it's really interesting to me. For me, the most shocking person who said yes to me, and I think you would. I'm not sure if you heard of him, but I think you would like him a lot. His name is Derek Sivers. Have you heard?
Oh yeah, I know. I have his book on my shelf. I
think you will love his work because I can tell like the way you act. But
no, I have his book is No or Hell Yes, I think,
yes,
or Hell Yes book. Or No, right? Yeah, we just painted my bookshelves in my office, and so I was restacking all my books on the shelf. And moving from Atlanta last year to New York, I had to throw away 75% of my books because we just don't have space for them. And so the books that I kept are ones that I really relate to. And Derek's that No or Hell Yes, or Hell Yes or No, is a great way to think about things. Like if you're not super excited about doing something, then maybe it's not worth your time. Unless it's your taxes, because you got to do them. You got to, and even if you got to go to the gym, you got to find a way to be enthusiastic about it. So
Hell Yes or Hell No. I read that book and I really loved it, and I started exploring his other works, and I just really like the way he thinks about life, and I think he's a powerful nonconformist who's very original in his thinking. So when I sent him an email and he's like, "Yeah, I would love to come on your show," it was just so interesting. I'm like, wow, like, and I've had many other moments like that where people displayed interest, and for me, it's like you just never know how other people may view you, or see you. And I'm continuously reminded about that every time I invite someone, 'cause just like you, I mean, I would probably say like my shooting percentage is probably like 5 to 10%, but the people who say yes, like, and
if you're what they told me when I was doing sales right out of college, in 1991, if people are saying yes 75% of the time, you're not asking enough. Your rejection ratio should be at least 50%. Because if everybody's saying yes, then you're not asking. You're not taking enough chances.
And so for me, I would say like I'll probably say like maybe 10% of the people I ask say yes, but it's interestingly enough, like I actually don't take the rejections personal enough, because sometimes maybe they might be super busy. Sometimes too, it may not be in alignment. And I've noticed that the people, including you, who always say yes to me, we end up just having a lot in common, like without even knowing. Like, oh, you're from Atlanta. Hey, we watched Derek Sivers. Like, and it's kind of like, okay, it was probably meant to be. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I try to take a non-emotional approach too. Nobody has the obligation to do my podcast. It's not. Everybody has the right to say no to a podcast. And so the people that are going to say yes are generally going to be people that want the world to know about them or their work. And that's why, with authors, a lot of times what'll happen is I'll look for an author that I probably couldn't get when their book comes out, because they're going to be on The Tonight Show or CBS Sunday Morning. They're going to be doing big media properties. But what happens is their book comes out, there's a lot of fanfare, and then it just goes, and it all goes away within like 3 weeks. And I'm not talking about the biggest authors. I'm talking about sort of like, more intellectual type stuff, or, and so call them 3 months, 6 months after their book comes out and say, "Hey, I've read your book," or I'm reading your book and I really like it, and I'd love for you to come on. I tell you, man, for somebody, when an author writes a book, they put 2 or 3 years, sometimes more of their life into it. And then it comes out and no author is satisfied with how their book sells. They're like, this was so important to me, and it only sold 20,000 copies or 100,000 copies or whatever they think success looks like. And so when somebody comes up and makes an intelligent ask and says, "I've talked to these other people," they're gonna say yes most of the time.
You know what's funny? That's exactly what I did with Derek Sivers. Actually, after I read his book, Hell Yeah, Hell No, I literally wrote like 3 to 4 paragraphs about why I love the book so much and how much I benefited from it. Like, and I talked about like the specific excerpts of the book, and he could tell how personalized. And I wasn't just like sending it to like everyone, like, I think that was one of the reasons he said, that's literally what I did with Derek Sivers, like what you're talking about, Yeah. And so, I mean, hearing you talk about this is good. Another thing I'm super curious about in general is because we talked about your comedy career, and then you're a podcaster and a writer. What got you into podcasting?
Well, I worked at Facebook, so I've been in and out of comedy in the corporate world, and when I was in LA doing stand-up comedy, and it was going okay, and I was doing a lot of good shows actually, but I realized when I went out there, I was like, oh, this is going to be like you have to decide I am a comedian, and I embrace the 20-year challenge before anybody might even know my name. Whether or not I can pay my rent or not. And I was sort of like, I had worked in the corporate world. I was making real money before that. And when I got engaged to my wife and mother of my 2 children, she's mother now, she wasn't then. I was like, I think I need a job. And so a buddy of mine called and said, about that time, would you be interested in the job at Facebook? And it was a small company at the time. And so I was like, sure, because I'd heard about it because it was growing so fast and it was a phenomenon. And I liked the guy and the other people on the sales team. So I went to work for Facebook for 4.5 years. And so I made some money. I made a lot of money, more money than I ever dreamed of, honestly. And I retired at 42 years old. And I was super excited. I moved back to Atlanta, and I was like, oh, I've got everything I ever wanted. And after 3 or 6 months of that, I was like, why am I bored and lonely and feeling like a piece of garbage? Because I wasn't working. I wasn't involved. I didn't have a place. I didn't have a good answer to the question, what do you do for a living? Who are you? Because that's really when we ask in America, what do you do? We're really asking, who are you?
Yeah.
What are you about? Who are your people? What are your best accomplishments? That kind of thing. And so I started reading everything I could about money and wealth, and the connection between wealth and happiness and all this kind of stuff. And I started writing some stuff. And a friend of mine was like, you really should be making a podcast. This is the kind of thing that people would want to talk about and hear about on a podcast. And for a lot of years, I mean, for 2 or 3 years, I said, no. And then my one regret about starting a podcast is that instead, I wish I would have started in 2016 and started in 2019.
Yeah.
Because in 2019, I mean, it's still, I still have a head start on a lot of people. Yeah. But in 2016, there were probably 500,000 podcasts, maybe 100,000 podcasts.
Yeah.
And today there's 6 million.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot less competition, yet a lot more. But I didn't know what I wanted to talk about but in 2016. And so I waited until I had an idea that I really cared about. And so that's when I finally started.
Yeah, there's power in that first mover advantage in anything, including business, definitely with podcasts. I feel like the earlier you did the podcast, just the earlier, the less competition, then of course, like the more people watching and the more it's easier to stand out. I agree with you for sure. And so you created this book, you created a podcast, and you originally called it Crazy Money with the intentions of talking about the relationship between money and happiness, a topic
Correct.
that I'm super interested into, and I would love to dive into. Just being someone who worked for Facebook and has made so much money in your life, what has money taught you about happiness, and what's your perspective on it overall?
I think money is really important. I mean, it's you need to have a certain amount of money, and what worries me about our human tendency, I guess the net of it is this: our brains tell us certain things are going to make us happy, and our brains are mostly wrong. And the way our brains work around money is fascinating, because one of the things that stood out to me early in my reading was that our happiness isn't a determinant of how much money we have in the absolute. It's determined by how much money we have relative to the people around us. So literally, if you take billionaires and put them together, and they're going to know exactly who has more billions than somebody else.
Yeah.
And the presence of somebody with more billions than a mere single-digit billionaire will make that single digit billionaire feel inferior, whether consciously or subconsciously.
Yeah.
And that's messed up, dude. I'm not saying that person is going to do anything silly. I'm just saying we're tribal people, we're tribal animals, and we are aware of the hierarchy of power, and money and power are basically the same thing.
Have you read the book Never Enough by Andrew Wilkinson? Or do you know who Andrew Wilkinson is?
The book sounds very familiar. I have I don't think I've read the book.
So Andrew Wilkinson is a billionaire author, and he literally shares his story about becoming a billionaire and how much stress it caused him and how much unhappiness it caused him. And he literally said what you're saying, where he would network with a bunch of billionaires and just see how like financially insecure they were, because everyone they were around with were just a bunch of billionaires saying, "Oh, I bought a super yacht," and then this, and it just kind of
look, man. Let me tell you something. Our conception of what is a lot changes. So when I grew up, I thought the richest people I knew lived on this one street in Atlanta, and they belonged to a country club that I thought was fantastic, and they took nice trips and they drove nice cars, and they sent their kids to good colleges without worrying about how much it cost. That's what I thought rich was. And it's not a coincidence that when I moved back to Atlanta with my Facebook money, I bought a house on that street, I joined that country club, and we take nice trips. But guess what happens? The way I defined rich when I was in high school and college has changed, because now when you're in the game a little bit, you start hanging out with people that go, "Oh, by the way, when I take a trip, I don't go down to Hartsfield. I go to PDK, and I get on my net jets, or I get on my private jet. That's how we travel." And then you go, "Oh, I didn't even know that was a thing, man. I didn't even know that existed." But you start to find out that, and that's not even billionaires yet. And then you start hanging out, you meet a couple of billionaires, and you're like, "Oh, these people have more money than they could ever spend." Yeah. I know people who have that kind of dough, and they're looking at investments, and they're like, "I can't do an investment less than $1 million. It's not worth my time to do the paperwork on it."
Yeah.
So like all of a sudden you start going, "Wait a minute, what?" Like, think about this. The difference between the poorest person in America and the 99th percentile. What do you think what do you think the difference in net worth is between 0 and 99%?
I don't know. Maybe 40K, 50K. I'm not sure, honestly.
It's like $15 million. Okay, so to be in the top 1% of net worth, you have to have maybe 10, maybe $15 million. It's something like that. It changes every year because of inflation. Okay,
yeah.
So that's $10 million from 0 to 99th percentile. You've heard of the 1%?
Yeah,
the 1% is like you've got 15 million more, and you've got no problems economically unless you're a moron with your money. But in that 1%. Within that 1%, the difference between the guy at 99.01% and 99.99%, what do you think that is?
Billions, like
hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So you can be in the top 1%, and somebody else in that way, like somebody with $15 million and Jeff Bezos at $300 billion, or Elon Musk at $300 billion, or whatever. Like you're talking about 15 million, you can't even clean their shoes for that kind of money relative to how much dough they have. So the difference between like a billionaire, so 10 million is, so a billionaire has 100 times more money than somebody with $10 million. 100 times. And they're supposedly both in the 1%. And so what we don't realize is, and this is why this relative, this
part, you have to read the book Never Enough. It's literally because
I think I pulled it up. I think I actually reached out to
about it. It's literally everything you're saying. Like,
I think I might have reached out to this guy, but he didn't get back to me. I think I may have, but I have to look it up. But yeah, that's exactly that. I mean, this is the game, and what's crazy is that we kind of have to, especially if you're motivated and ambitious person, you kind of have to do it yourself before you believe that it's actually true. And I don't want to demotivate anybody out there who's out there trying to get theirs.
Of
right.
Course. Yeah.
I think that's really important. And I think, in America today, You hear from younger people that the system is rigged, that it's working against them. And I'm like, well, you're not going to get the best outcome if that's how you look at it. But if you look at it like, I'm going to go, this economy needs me. My success is out there waiting for me, and I'm going to go get it. You are 1,000 times more likely to succeed than somebody who's just sitting back, criticizing everything, waiting for opportunity to come to them, because it's not going to show up on your doorstep. You got to go get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. After everything you're saying reminds me of the concept of something called mimetic desire. And I've actually learned the concept from the book Never Enough. And after reading that book, I'm like, yeah, I'm cool on being a billionaire. I don't want to be a billionaire. But when
this is the problem. You don't need to be a billionaire to be like the way. Here's something. Most people are broke. You know what they dream of? They dream of being rich. You know what they should be dreaming about? Being not broke.
Yeah.
Because the opposite of broke isn't rich. The opposite of broke is not broke. Be not broke. Start there. How do you get financial autonomy?
Yeah. Yeah.
You get another job, you pay off your credit cards, you start saving 10% of everything you make. You live within your means. You buy a car that doesn't break down. You pay to change the oil when it needs to be changed, so that you don't need you don't have to replace $1,200 worth of repairs a year later. Like, these are the ways you get to not broke. These are the ways you create independent financial autonomy. Don't worry about your real estate empire until you got your not broke card.
Yeah. I everything you're saying is speaking to my soul, and I really have come to an interesting grips between relationship and money and happiness. Personally on my real estate journey, where after buying my third property, it just did not feel fulfilling at all. And I was like, okay, the first time I brought up my house, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like, whatever. Like, I did it at a young age. The second time it was cool, but it wasn't as exciting. The third time I brought a property, I was like, all right, what am I doing? I feel like I'm on a hamster wheel, just kind of like chasing this. And I'm like, I'm only 29, 30. Why do I have to have so many properties? And I started really to start introspecting on my values in regards to money and happiness, and what really makes me happy.
And what'd you come up with?
Gratitude. Yeah. I am so happy. I'm so happy with my life. I literally, sometimes I just cry out of tears of gratitude of how happy I am. I'm living my dreams. I'm pursuing my dreams. I get to talk to incredible people from all over the world about topics that I'm seriously interested in about. I have properties that many people would wish to have. I'm healthy. I used to be sick all the time with sickle cell disease. It's a chronic disorder. And honestly, just to be healthy in itself brings me gratitude, because I know what it's like to not always be sick. So when I am healthy, healthy, that brings me happy. And so I would say easily, if I had to, I haven't really studied this as much, but if I had to say the number one thing for me personally, it's easily gratitude. Just being grateful for what you have.
Cool.
Yeah. What would you say for you personally? Because you seem like to study this topic a lot.
Well, I think gratitude mindfulness is the first step towards gratitude, and gratitude is the step to not needing more. Gratitude is a step to not feeling this angst to say, well, if I get more, I'll be happy. And it's different for everybody. I interviewed Craig Newmark from Craigslist, who's got hundreds of millions of dollars. And he made the decision years ago when he started the site to say, I want to be useful to my fellow human beings more than I want to make extra money from marketers or venture capitalists who are going to throw money at me. I want to be proud of what we're doing. I want to work in a sustainable way. And when I say sustainable, I don't mean ecologically sustainable, though he probably meant that too. He meant like from a lifestyle perspective, like, you could probably make a lot more money if you work 100 hours a week on your properties, but you want to live, in a way that, hey, you know what? I want to create a balanced life that allows me to be healthy and that allows me to have relationships and things like that. So yeah, mindfulness and gratitude is how you break yourself out of that constant nagging that you're not enough and that you need more to be happy.
Didn't I saw with the founder created when you spoke to him? Didn't he say he's giving away a lot of his money too, or something like
Yeah, he's giving it all away. He's giving
Wow.
away hundreds of millions of dollars. You know, he's keeping a little bit so that he has enough for himself to manage his lifestyle for, you know, another 20 or 30 years, however he's going to be alive. And you know, maybe he's going to pass some down to nieces and nephews or things like that. I try not to ask him too many personal questions,
Of
but
course.
like, you know, he copped to the publicly available information that he's given away $300 or $400 million, and he still has a little bit left to give away. And
Wow.
so, you know, he's trying to use his wealth to fund a certain number of initiatives that he feels like he can help with through the remainder of his life.
Man, that is so interesting to me. If I had him on, I would be asking 1,000 questions. But it's just that philanthropic effort. I really applaud. I can't imagine. I mean, that's a huge sacrifice, you know. But we need more people like that for sure.
Yeah, no, he's a special guy. He's a really special guy.
Yeah, because like what you said, what the hell do you need billions of dollars for? You know.
Look, I didn't say what do you need billions of dollars for. I didn't say that. And listen, I'd love to be a billionaire. I'm just not willing to do what it takes to be a billionaire.
Yeah.
Even if I knew I could do it, I'm not like. There's a guy, I read his book, and he was a magazine, a publishing magnate, Magnate, from the late 90s. Dennis Phillips. I think that's what his name was. And he wrote a book, I think it was called How to Be Rich. And I wrote an article about it for my Substack. And basically what he said was to be rich. And he meant really rich. He meant like $100 million 30 years ago. So call that $400 million today, which most people would agree. That's pretty rich.
Yeah.
And he said to earn that kind of money, you have to be absolutely unreasonable. That you have to be willing to do things that reasonable people aren't willing to do. And the reason most of us don't do that is because we prioritize our relationships with our family and friends. We don't consider them distractions from our wealth generating efforts. We think that they're the priority in our life. But if you really want to be rich, that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
And I think he's right to a meaningful extent, not 100%, but like you have to worry. You have to be unreasonably unconcerned with what the world might think about you and go and get it.
I read his book and
oh, you did?
Yeah, I read that book. It's a good book. Because I was very curious about the nature of becoming rich, and the thing I like about his book was like it was very direct and blunt. Like I feel like a lot of times when either on YouTube or whatnot, when you watch these videos, I don't know. I feel like they don't talk about realistically about the cost of what it takes. Like they will try to simplify it to get the message viral or whatever, but they never really talk about like the actual cost, like psychologically, financially, like, you know, to your mind and what it did. And something that was interesting with him was he was a billionaire. I mean, I don't know. I mean, not billionaire, but he had a lot of money. He was clearly rich, but his passion was poetry. Obviously, he didn't become rich for poetry.
Yeah.
But I remember reading his book, and he was like, if it was up to me, I would have actually focused on my hobby for poetry a lot earlier.
Well, he could have, but he chose not to. Felix Dennis, How to Get Rich.
Yeah.
That's the name of the book.
Yeah.
Felix Dennis is the author. I butchered his.
No. I read it. No. Yeah, great book. And it just goes to your point. I remember he literally, like, I remember reading it, and I thought it was so interesting. He said, if it was up to him, he would have focused on poetry more.
It was up to him. It was up to him. It's up to each of us to choose how we live our lives.
Yeah.
You know, I just interviewed this guy, John Kenny, who's a novelist. He's a writer. He's a funny guy. He writes for the New Yorker, and he's written a few novels and a few other books that are pretty funny as well. And this most recent book was about death, and the novel is about an obituary writer who accidentally publishes his own obituary in a very snarky way. And, you know, his net of it, and of course, this was a funny book about death, which means it's a funny book about life, about how to live.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, in the end, we're all our own obituary writers. And so what are you going to write? And the way you choose what you're going to write is how you choose to spend your time. What do you focus on? Felix Dennis could have focused on writing poetry, but he chose to build his business empire. And that's what he's going to be remembered for. He could have chosen to write his poetry, and maybe the world would have noticed, probably wouldn't have. But, he would have gotten his thoughts out, and he would have been living in a different manner consistent with the way he thought his time best spent. But he chose a different path. And, John Kenny, I asked him, like, how do you get to where you're taken seriously as a novelist? Because to be a novelist, and we spoke very frankly about this, is like, he said he had no money. He's like, and he wanted more. And I said, well, do you regret it? And I said, because a lot of people would love to be you in terms of having published as much as you published. And he said, well, you have to want it. You have to be willing to sacrifice the money. You have to be willing to deal with the uncertainty of publishing ups and downs, of very modest pay, because you love to write more than anything else.
Yeah. It's a very interesting topic. And I feel like when we're talking between money and happiness, I feel like it really starts to question, what are your values and what do you really prioritize? Do you prioritize relationships? How much do you prioritize community? How much do you prioritize a peace of mind? For me, that's a peace of mind is everything. And I feel like
100%.
but obviously when you're on that pursuit of money, I feel like 9 times out of 10 you're on the pursuit of not getting peace. Like
well, yeah, yes and no though. Yes and no. I mean, most people are working to take care of their families.
Yeah.
I mean, most married people or people with kids, right? Your job isn't like, you're not necessarily doing it because you want to do it. You're doing it because you need to pay your rent and you need to put food on the table.
Yeah.
And that's your priority. And that, talk about holy pursuits, that's a holy pursuit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is your number one obligation as a parent, is to take care of your kid and to do what it takes to take care of them. Now, the question becomes, if you have the option, at what level are you providing for your kids? And are you doing something you hate?
True.
To not pay for room and board, but to pay for the trip to Paris next summer? Because that's a nice to have, but it's not. Kids don't need to go to Paris to be healthy young people.
Yeah.
That's a nice to have. So if you're doing a job you hate and making yourself miserable and sick to keep up with your neighbor who's sending their kid to Paris, that's maybe worth thinking about.
Yeah. And as a kid, when you're having these experiences with your parents, like, no one is thinking about, how much money this costs or whatnot. Like, you're 8 years old, you're 9 years old, you're too young to even know the logistics. All you know is that, my parents are here and like I'm spending time with them. And I think that's, what it's the most important thing is like how I feel like where your time goes is shows a lot about who you are and what you value.
100%.
Yeah. So
show me your calendar and I'll show you your values.
Yeah, man. So before we end this podcast, one question I really wanted to ask you too was because I'm really big on gratitude, and I'm just curious for your answer, Paul. What is one major decision that you made in your life that you're very grateful for?
Well, marrying my wife was a very important one, and choosing, if you read, if there's a lot of talk about this right now, that the person you choose to marry is the most important decision you make in your life. Because nothing will make you less stable, nothing will make you more unhappy than choosing wrong in the marriage department.
I imagine.
Nothing will destroy wealth like a divorce.
Yeah.
Nothing will destroy like a divorce with very expensive lawyers. But more importantly, like the most important mission you're on, and for most of us, is raising good kids. Mm-hmm. If you choose to have them, I'm not saying you have to. And so there's nothing better than waking up and being happy with who you're next to, and being happy with what you have in front of you during the day.
Man, that's great to hear, man. I'm a single man, but it's always great to hear people um have examples of marriage, and it makes me curious. I'm always curious when I hear people. I don't know you like that, but you seem happily married. How did y'all meet, and how did you know she was for you?
We met at a comedy show in New York City 20 years
Ah,
ago. Yeah,
that's
it's
dope.
funny, and she said she doesn't remember meeting me there. Um, you know, you know, look, I've been writing about this a lot. She hasn't seen it, and she probably won't listen this long into the podcast, so I can probably say it without her knowing. Look, one of the reasons I knew she was for me is because I'd been through some rough relationships, and I knew what wasn't going to work for me. And you can be in a relationship with somebody you love, who is a wonderful person, and it can be wrong. It can be not a good fit. You can be on different pages about things, or emotionally you're just not compatible. And sometimes, and those were some of the hardest days of my life, coming to that realization. But when you've been through it, you go, okay, I know more about what I'm looking for than before that relationship experience. And I was on a podcast a few years ago with a guy who was in high school, and he was like, tell me about, how do you deal with broken relationships? I'm like, look, buddy, they're all broken until you get married and you choose to be somebody. My wife's a very like spiritual person, in the like a modern spiritual type person.
Okay.
And she's like, you're my soulmate. And it's like, okay, maybe, but I could have been somebody else's soulmate too. Right? Soulmates aren't found, they're chosen. That's my point. When you choose to commit, that's your soulmate. Your soulmate isn't based on, we both love Netflix and chimichangas. That's not a soulmate. Your soulmate is a person who says, I'm going to stand by you when shit gets real.
Yeah.
I'm going to stand by you. Sorry for cursing, but I'm going to stand by you when the money's gone. I'm going to stand by you until we die. The person who is taking care of you when you're drooling on your bib when you're 85 or 90, that's your soulmate.
Yeah.
Not the person who makes your toes curl in bed when you're 29 years old. Anybody can do that.
Yeah. Well, I personally believe the real test of a relationship, it gets tested when things are going bad, and then you start to see the character of who you're dealing with. And I don't even think it's just with marriage. I think it's with business. I think it's with friendships.
Totally.
Anything. And
totally.
I've journaled about this. Like, my best friends are the ones who help me go through my mess, and they don't just value me for my success. And so, yeah, it sounds like you found like that with your wife, and it seems like those struggles are a great test of.
I appreciate you pointing out that the marriage isn't the only relationship, because a lot of people won't end up getting married, and I don't want to say it's for everybody, right? I mean, most people will, but a lot of people won't. But that whole thing about character, you're right. It shows up especially in business, man.
Yeah,
when people do what they say they were going to do, even when things turn bad, that's a person of character. When somebody doesn't disappear on you when they maybe could or they want to, that's character. And your friends who stick by you, your friends who show up at your mom's funeral, your friends who do things for you when it's inconvenient for them, that's character.
Yes, sir. Love it, man. Well, hey, Paul, this has been a great podcast. Where can people reach out to you to learn more about the work you do and just connect with you?
Yeah, you can find me on words.paulollinger.com. That's my Substack. It's PAULOLLINGER is the Paul Ollinger part. Words.paulollinger.com.
Awesome. And I have to ask this because you have had a lot of interesting guests. If you had to pick one person who you believe would be great for this podcast, who would it be and why?
Elton John.
Elton.
Oh, wait, for your podcast or for my podcast?
For my podcast.
Well, either one. We'd both be lucky
Elton
to have Sir Elton say.
And why?
I've often, Sir Elton has Atlanta connections, and I always wanted to, and I know somebody who knows him, but he's just one of those guys, he's done a lot of living, and he struggled with addiction. He was closeted during a time when it wasn't okay to be gay. He came out. He's had massive success. He's had massive challenges, and you just want to. I want to pick the brain of a person who's seen, the highs and the lows and the, and I happened to see him in a movie this weekend, so he's top of mind. So Elton
John,
Elton baby.
Okay.
Step back, honky cat. Do my show. Do Ike's show.
All
Step back, honky cat.
Yeah, I'm gonna look into his work, and hey, man, if I ever get him on, I'm definitely gonna be like, yo, I met this guy named Paul, and
you'll connect me with his people. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Well, look, man, I truly enjoyed this conversation. It's just, I never really know how these conversations are gonna go, but I appreciate your values. I'm thankful for you sharing your wisdom gained from being a comedian and your podcast and being a podcaster, and just thank you for your time, Paul. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you reaching out, and I hope more people respond in the positive to your kind introduction. So thanks, man.
Awesome. Remember, everybody, the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. And if God is for us, who can be against us?